Drybrushing, a method for speed painting as well as a useful technique to adding texture to your models. But does the material you use to remove the paint really matter? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to look at in this video. I'm Peachy and this is Peachy Tips. So I've been drybrushing for a good portion of my painting life, and that's probably come up to like 3 decades. And I'm a creature of habit and I like to use a paper towel. Been using paper towels for most of that time, mostly because it's super accessible and easy to get hold of, and I have a lot hanging around the house. But is that really the right material to use? But since starting the channel and doing lots of paint guides on it, I've been advised, mansplained and recommended a variety of different materials to use. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. I'm going to compare 4 different materials for drybrushing. The trusty paper towel, some cardboard, a microfiber cloth, as well as the wooden pallets you see hanging around. So that's what we're going to be doing. I'm going to be painting up a bunch of figures sent to me by Signum Games. This is for their new range or Kickstarter called Napoleonics Steel Magic. Now, they're pretty cool looking figures. As a fan of Silver Bayonet and Turnip 28, they ooze vibes of that. And also from a scale point of view, they tie in really nicely with all my collections of 28mm stuff. At first, I initially thought, oh, these are a little bit bigger than 28mm, but they're not. So if you are a Silver Bayonet fan or a Turnip 28 fan, these are going to be perfect miniatures to add in your collection. I'm looking at doing some test models, mostly in this video, which is why I'm kind of like doing some dry brushing, do some speed painting. So that's kind of the canvas of today's video is these Napoleonics. There's 3 factions to start off with. There's the British, there's the French, and then the Abyssal Legions. You've got all sorts of weird stuff in there. You've got like armored grenadiers in full plate armor, which looks mega with claymores. You have Napoleon riding a griffin, some weird centaur cavalry, which are French, and then just goblins with bicorns, amongst many other stuff. Also these guys, which remind me of putrid blight kings mixed with old guard. So lots of weird fantastical stuff. So that's what I'm going to paint. I'm going to paint a bunch of them and show different techniques being used, or at least different materials being used for dry brushing. So first up is going to be the trusty paper towel. Now, I get a lot of comments about me using paper towel going, it's wrong, you should not use it, it dries out the paint too much. I mean, it is dry brushing, it's kind of the point, but I get what you mean. It adds a bit of a chalkiness to it, and if not done right or not used right, it can tear the fibers from the paper towel. So I know that, I've been using it for many years, I tend not to have that problem, but I'm going to demonstrate it anyway, and then people can judge for themselves, and I'll also be rating at the very end which is my favourite material to use. Now, if you are new to the concept of dry brushing, the idea is to get some paint on your brush and remove it onto an absorbent material like I'm doing here with a paper towel. Then it's a matter of just gently flicking the brush over the miniature to pick out the raised details. Now, depending on how hard you press down on the brush will certainly change the amount of paint that's applied. Now, I personally find building up the dry brush gradually helps get a smoother finish. I don't expect immediate results with the first pass. I just have to slowly build up with a couple of coats. And that's what I'm doing here. Initially with the first red, and then for a bit more of a highlight, I will use a lighter red like I'm doing here, and that adds a bit more punch. Again, the second dry brush, or even a third if you wanted to, you'll need to be a bit softer with those. It is like layering or edge highlighting. You are just gradually building up those colours, but being a little bit more softer with the later ones. Now, another thing you can do is add moisture to your dry brushing. Now, I know that sounds kind of weird because it's like, but it's dry brushing, Peachy. It kind of is a nice little way of getting a bit more of a smoother finish. It's really good for things like cloth or bone or skin and stuff like that. So sometimes I just add a little bit of water, and this is where it's more, if you get more experienced at dry brushing, that's when you probably want to move into that. If you're quite new to it, I wouldn't touch this straight away, but I tend to use like the back end of my brush, drop a little bit of water onto the tissue paper or the other materials that will feature in a bit, and then just mix that in with my paint, and then it adds a little bit more moisture to it. It's one of those techniques I like to show in person. I've done seminars in the past and I've shown people like dry brushing skeletons and stuff, and it works really well, but so much can go wrong with it as well. So when you see or hear people say use more moisture, add more water to your dry brushing, I mean, that's kind of what they're getting at, but there's so many things that can go wrong. It's one of those things that just don't go into that field if you are new. If you aren't experienced, then by all means do it. You're familiar with it. I've been doing it for years. I know how much moisture to add to the tissue paper or cardboard or whatever. But yes, don't run before you can crawl, so to speak. But yeah, really, it's just a nice way of getting a nice smoother finish. Now, paper towels themselves are, I would say, fairly commonplace. I imagine most households have some form of kitchen roll or paper towel that they can easily get hold of. Cost effective wise, you're probably looking at less than £1 for a roll of tissue paper. It will last a while. Not super sustainable, granted, but easily accessible and affordable. Now, don't get confused with tissue paper, so like your toilet roll, that kind of stuff. And I sometimes wonder with comments, they might have been using that and not kitchen roll, because kitchen roll is a bit more robust. Certainly the blue sort of stuff that you get like when you're at college or university or in like, I guess, restrooms and stuff like that. That's super sturdy. But yeah, when I hear people telling me that when they've dry brushed, they get loads of bits of like tissue or whatever, I'm like, well, it's probably because you're using tissue paper or really cheap kitchen roll maybe. But yeah, it's a good, easily accessible, affordable option for dry brushing, and one I've been using for years, and it's my favourite. So next up is going to be cardboard. Now, back in the day when I worked at Games Workshop, Citadel would do a palette pad, which will have all the sort of palette paper that you'd use for mixing your paints on, which are kind of good. Wet palettes are probably a little bit better. They certainly keep the paint moist for longer. But what you would have at the back would be the cardboard. Now, a lot of people didn't realise this. The cardboard wasn't there just to keep the paper firm. I mean, it kind of did do that, but it, like a sketchbook would or a notepad would, it was also there because you'd use cardboard for dry brushing as well. It's quite porous. It would soak up the paint, but it was also the dry brushing palette of that book. And I don't think that was marketed particularly well, because I mentioned it a few times on live stream or like in videos, but a lot of people didn't know that. So yeah, cardboard is one of those materials that's been used a long time for doing dry brushing. And I would do, when I was doing big scenery projects, I'd have like a big bit of like a flap of a Amazon box, something like that, and just put my paint on it and dry brush. So yeah, it's a useful material. So we're going to look at that one now. Now, unlike the previous material, I can apply my paint straight onto the cardboard, as it won't dry out immediately and saves me having to have a separate palette hanging around or some other receptacle for putting my paint into. Another option you can do with the cardboard as well is you can mix on the material too. So you can obviously get 2 dollops of paint and then mix them together and then dry brush that onto the surface area of what you're doing or whatever. But when it comes to the results, honestly, I don't think there's that much difference between this and the paper towel. Obviously, as I mentioned previously, the amount of pressure will yield different results, softer applications, more subtle highlights, etc. Now, if you press heavier on your brush, then you're going to get more of a scratchy, rougher kind of effect. And this is great if you're doing things like buildings or tanks or cliff faces and stuff like that. Also a really good option if you want to quickly base coat a model. You just you don't wipe as much paint off and you do a heavily application of paint on that. So they can yield different results as well. My main issue with the cardboard though is once it starts to dry, it kind of acts as a barrier with the cardboard and ceases to become as porous. So you end up finding you like flipping it around, using the other side, and before you know it, you just got lots of torn up bits of cardboard scattered around your room. It looks like a puppy's been in there tearing away at your box. So next up is the microfiber cloth, or as I like to call it, a stolen duster from Mrs. Peach. Now, these retail anywhere between like a couple of quid, depending on how big the pack is. Singles, I think they're not very much, like 50p, something like that. Again, depending where you live and what kind of currency you have. It's not a massive expense, but it's still an expense. And I'll probably say paper towel is probably a bit cheaper, but the longevity maybe of the microfiber cloth is probably better. But let's put this through its paces. Now, I've not used one of these before. This is all new to me. So it's one of those ones that was recommended in the comment section multiple times, actually. So I thought, you know what? I've got one at hand. Well, I didn't, and I just stole one from the cupboard. Mr. Peach will find that out very soon. Now, much like the paper towel, with this particular one, you will need some form of palette at hand with paint in it as well. So again, unlike the cardboard, you can't apply it onto it. You'll need some receptacle to put your paint in before you start obviously wiping your paint off the brush to do your dry brushing. Now, when I was using this, it did feel a bit weird when I was doing the dry brushing. Now, I'm used to obviously like using different materials, but there was something different with this one. And I guess with experience, I'll get more familiar with it and understand it a bit better. But yeah, it was just an odd feeling when I was initially using it. But it removed the paint nicely, and like the previous applications, covered well enough. Now, I wondered how it will deal with adding in moisture, as this is a nice way, like I said, to get a smoother finish on your dry brush miniatures. They can look rough and chalky for sure. Again, great for staying wood and terrain features. Now, it's certainly soaked in well enough. I'm used to using paper towels for this as they're more absorbent and I'm super familiar with them. Here, however, I could tell it was damp, and I think with more experience with the cloth, it will yield better results from a smoother dry brushing application point of view. But as materials go, it was cool. It felt different, like I said, but the results, it didn't really yield anything different. It felt different when I was using it for sure, but the end results weren't that much different. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. You could use like face cloths, old towels as well, I guess, as a substitute if you don't have microfiber cloths. Again, from a budget point of view, if you want to spend a couple of quid on getting some of these and they're just dedicated for doing dry brushing, they will last longer for sure. Whereas paper towel, obviously, you probably use, I certainly use paper towels over several sessions. I don't just throw them once I've done. They will be there for a little while, usually 3 or 4 projects sometimes. But it, again, depends on the size of the project and depends what you're dry brushing. But yeah, I mean, they were fine. I like the microfiber cloths. They did the job that they were kind of expected them to do, which was remove the paint and then allow it to go onto the model. Nothing special, I would say. I didn't like, I wasn't wowed. Let's put it that way. It was good, but it wasn't like wow effect. So the last material is going to be wood, or more specifically, those wooden pallets that you get that you see a lot of people having around with like the logos on it. Now, if you have a favorite creator and you want to support them, by all means, buy them to support your creator. It's a good way of doing that. But really, at the end of the day, these are just wooden pallets. They are just wood. They're nothing special. There are some companies out there that will charge you £15 to £25 just to slap their logo on, which is great. If you can afford that and want to do that. Now, I got one made here for me by a lovely fellow at Colourforge. It was at Partisan. He was like, Peachy, I've done this for you. I was like, I want you to use this in videos. You shouldn't be using paper towels. I was like, okay, I like using paper towels. But it's got my logo on it. Will I ever do this as merch? Probably not. If I did, would I charge 25 quid? Definitely not. Now, you will see people add in like texture to them. You can do that yourself. You can put like dots of super glue, the paint when that dries. I've seen people adding in sprues, like gluing sprues on. Again, this is adding like lots of different textures. I don't know really if that makes that much of a difference when it comes to removing paint. If it feels good for you, do it. If you want to support a creator that's done that, do it. But at the end of the day, gimmick in it. I feel it's a bit of a gimmick. It's just a bit of wood. So here is the Peachy one that was, like I said, passed on to me by a lovely fella at Colourforge. So really what I'm doing here is very much the same sort of process as I did with the cardboard version. I'm just applying some dollops of paint on, and then I'm just dry brushing it off onto the actual wood. The difference here is the paint will soak in better. So once it's dry, it won't, like cardboard, become a shield. It will soak in and it's porous again, and you can continue doing layers after. Now, over time, when you are applying lots of paint and using the wooden palette a lot, it will clog up. It will sort of become a mishmash of colours. You can spray back over like with like a black, or like I've used here, Peachy Peach. And yeah, that's cool. Eventually, I think it will clog up the detail, but it's working no different than the others. When I'm dry brushing over the model, I'm getting the same kind of effects. It's a very similar finish. You can mix on the palette, which is great. You can even add moisture as well. Like a tip is just using the other side of your dry brush or whatever, and then just dipping that into the water, dabbing that onto like the tissue paper or the microfiber cloth, or in here, the wood itself, and then you can just move a bit of paint to it, and then that can add a bit of moisture as well to the paint, so it's a smoother finish. But really, at the end of the day, it's got the texture there, and if those dollops of paint dry, that adds another texture, similar to what I was saying, where people like glue bits of sprue on or add a bits of super glue. You know, that's all good, and it will add some texture, but really, you know, it's just another material for removing your paint off your brush and then allowing you to apply that onto a model. But really, at the end of the day, I don't think it's made that much of a difference to the end results of my dry brushing. The thing that really does make the difference is adding in that moisture, that little bit of moisture here and there. That's the thing, and building up the layers as well. So like with the cardboard version, I had 3 different browns. When I was doing the tissue paper version, I had like 2 reds, same with the blue as well. So that's really where you're getting your effects from. The material you're removing the paint off on, I don't think really makes that much of a difference in the long run. Granted, yes, tissue paper might tear a bit. Cardboard will kind of seal over the previous layer, so you're not removing as much, or it's not as effective. So there are things to bear in mind. But I'm going to rate them now, which is my least favorite to my most favorite. And I think I'm going to start with my least favorite being cardboard. The pros of cardboard is I can put paint onto it, so it kind of acts as my palette. But the whole kind of, once it's dry, and it doesn't take long as well, it does dry quite quickly on cardboard, it then acts as a barrier and then becomes a bit of a nightmare to do more dry brushing. So you, like I said, you're tearing, you've got loads of bits hanging around, it just becomes a bit of a mess. And I've done this when I've done like scenery projects at workshop. I've had loads of bits of cardboard, big bits of cardboard, but you're constantly going through it. And also it makes, I found the the paint on the brush gets a bit gummy as well. And I don't know if it's because it's coagulating on the cardboard a bit and drying out a bit quicker than I wanted it to. So that's something to bear in mind. So in third place, and I hate to admit it, but it's going to be paper towels. I love paper towels. I've been using them for years, but after using some of the other materials, I can see the benefits of them more than paper towels. They're recyclable and they hold the moisture longer. I can get some nice effects when I add more like water to my paper towel when I'm certainly want to do smoother dry brushes, but I can see the downsides of it tearing a bit more. Certainly if you're new to it and you're a bit heavy, there is a chance of getting those fibers on it, more so with tissue paper than paper towel. But again, if you're new, you won't always pick up on the difference. There's no assumed knowledge here. A lot of people, when they're new to the hobby or new to painting, don't know all the ins and outs, don't even know how to hold a brush properly, which is, you know, quite normal. It's fine. So I can see why some people get a bit het up with the whole tissue paper thing, but I like using it and I will use it a lot still anyway. And the only reason I really put it into my videos is because it's one of those things that most people have hanging around. But saying that, they will probably have face cloths, flannels, microfiber cloths, wood. But yes, so coming in third place is paper towels. Number 2 is going to be the microfiber cloth. And that's 2 because I'm still kind of new to it. It felt weird, but I do think longevity, it's going to be better than the paper towel because it does everything the paper towel does, except it's one piece of cloth and I can reuse it a lot. Could I wash it? Probably not. Because once you get like heat onto like acrylic paint, it will set it into the actual material. So that's why it's worth always, like, if you spill paint on your jeans or trousers or whatever, use cold water, not warm water. At least that's what I've been told by those that are in the know of cleaning. But yes, so I think there's more longevity with a microfiber cloth than probably a paper towel. There's less chance of it tearing, less chance of those like fibers coming off. So yeah, I can see the benefits of it. It costs £1 for like a couple, again, depending where you're getting them from. So there is a cost involved, but then there's a cost involved in getting a roll of paper towel, Peach. So, or at least a bundle, unless you're nicking them from work. Not condoning that. But yeah, microfiber cloths, I think, are a good, solid material to use if you can get hold of them. But I guess you've already worked it out. First place is going to be wood, or less so the wooden palette. I mean, wooden palettes are great. I like to support creators. I think if you've got a favorite creator that has a logo and a bit of merch and they want to, you know, earn some extra cash to support themselves, then by all means do it. But I do think they're a bit of a gimmick, and I think some people do scam you out of your money when you can just get a small slab of wood from anywhere. But at the end of the day, they are reusable, more so than cardboard, certainly more so than paper towels, and I guess in the long run, maybe more so than a microfiber cloth. The only downside is if you undercoat to make it look tidier because it makes you feel better, then there's only a limited amount of undercoats you could probably do before it blocks the pores. But then you can flip it around, you got another side. So yeah, you've probably got a lot more longevity in wood, and it has all the benefits of the others, really, at the end of the day. But yeah, eating a bit of humble pie. I love my paper towel, but wood is first place. It has to be. By all means, throw your ranking system into the comments as well. I'd like to see how you would rank these particular objects I've used or materials in the video. It would be really good fun. Also, if you found any other weird materials that are kind of interesting to use, be interesting to know what they are as well. But as always, a massive thank you for watching the video. Big thank you to my patrons. These are little hearts for you. I love you for all your support you show me. You are amazing. And a big thank you to Signum Games as well for sending out those Napoleonics Steel and Magic miniatures. Really good fun miniatures. Really enjoy painting them. This was more of a sort of like play around doing some test models. I also started adding some extra like colours as well, like putting some contrast paints on. It was more just to have a bit of a play, doing the dry brushing, adding in some extra colours after. I did a lot more painting probably than was necessary on these, and videoed lots more than I probably needed to. But yeah, they scale really well with all my 28mm Napoleonic stuff, as well as like the Turnip 28 stuff, which is predominantly 28mm scale as well. But if you are looking for some extra cool beasts or warriors to add to your Silver Bayonet or Turnip 28 games, I'd say this is a no-brainer because they've got the vibes, they've got the look. Having a grenadier in full plate armor, or not nearly full plate, it's got a lot of armor on and a big claymore as well. So some really cool characters in there. And also on their website, they have loads of other stuff as well. So do check it out for weird and wacky monsters and cool characters to paint up. But yes, I am going to carry on painting these guys up. I think come up with some test models, Probably try and get some stills of them, some 360s, throw them into the video somehow. But this guy just looking like a Peachy Blight King, but Napoleonic. It's just wild. It was cool. And I do like the goblins as well with the bicorns. There's some really interesting characters and monsters. I didn't really get much chance to do a full dedicated video on this, and maybe down the line if I get more time I will do. But yes, I just wanted to show the models being painted into some capacity, and to support Signum Games. But yeah, do check out there. I'll put a link in the description for their Kickstarter if you are interested in checking that out. But yeah, as always, thank you for watching. Love you all, and I'll catch you in the next one.